Hold on to your butts.
Da-da-da. Oh, hello. Welcome to episode 82 of the Civil War Breakfast Club podcast, joined again by Mary, a woman who should have spent many more days in the convent while I was busy flunking out of seminary school. I am merely a dented halo named Darren. What's going on, Mary? How are you?
Oh my God. I was not
Well,
expecting that. I know there is.
There's a theme to that. So yeah, what's going on? We'll talk more about that here in a little bit, but what's going on with you?
Not much. We had a great weekend in Baltimore. We got to see some baseball. We got to see some Civil War related graves, including Joseph E. Johnston and Trimble, as well as the Booth family plot and all that. So that was pretty cool. How are you?
Yeah, been pretty good. And don't forget a short period of running for our lives for a little while. But
I know, exactly. Yes, that was like Baltimore riots 2.0.
Ironic in the same road. It's kind of funny.
It was.
Life is a circle of life. So anyway, so we got some business to do tonight, Mary. But before we do, we have to do our tradition. What are we drinking here? So I guess I guess I'm the host. So I guess I have to do this. So what are you drinking?
I'm drinking Life in the Clouds, which in a way pays tribute to the seminary, because when you're up in that cupola, like you've been up in a couple of times, you feel like you're in the clouds, and that's by Collective Arts Brewing. And I'm drinking it out of the mug that I bought at the Seminary Ridge Museum, which totally gives away what our episode is.
I've figured out by now. I don't know what to tell you. I am drinking. It is a Yingling Black and Tan, courtesy of the great state of Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. I want to screw that one up. And I am drinking it out of my Tudor Hall mug. Speaking of mugs that we have, because I don't have a seminary mug museum. I'm not as cool as you guys do. So, speaking of the Seminary Museum, Mary, we have a special guest tonight we got to talk about. So I'm going to introduce him. He is Peter Miele, Mary. He's the executive director of the Seminary Ridge Museum, an education center. A little background: he's from northern New Jersey, so I don't even want to ask what baseball team he likes. If I have a suspicion. Okay, he got his bachelor's degree at Ramapo College, his master's at Shippensburg University, and he's working on his PhD at Penn State in Harrisburg. He's like I said, he's the executive director, and he also has a better beard than me. So I don't know. This isn't starting too well. So welcome, Peter. What's going on? Welcome aboard.
Yeah, thanks for having me. And I am drinking from the great Commonwealth of Pennsylvania and the great borough of Gettysburg, a Hop Hat IPA from Fourscore Brewing.
One of our favorites.
See it there, but one of my favorites. I am a member of the Fourscore Core mug club, and Darren is there you go. It's my favorite place to go in Gettysburg. But yes, I am from northern New Jersey, and I am from that other team in the AL East who is in the first place right now, beating out the Orioles and every step of the way.
Which team
wasn't
is
where
that?
The season started yet, so
yeah.
Say your team.
So,
What's your team?
The Yankees.
Oh, God.
Unfortunately, I figured as much, but it's okay.
Yeah. Although I do have a. When I moved to this area, I started kind of.
Oh my God! How do you get a Walgreens hat?
Well, I bought it. I am one of those fair weather fans that bought it after they won the World Series.
That's okay. Well, he's got a Washington Nationals, which is a pretty cool thing. And this nothing wrong with the Yankees. I mean, there are 12-year-old kids in New York City walking the streets who've never seen a World Series title. So you got to feel bad for those kids.
I was a Yankee fan starting in the mid '90s. So if you're living in northern New Jersey and growing up in that Jeter dynasty, there was nothing better than the 96 to 2000 stretch, and then we've been disappointed ever since.
Well, I guess it depends on how you look at it, but that's okay.
My team of Cleveland, 2016, that World Series was like the Great Halt at Cedar Creek. That's exactly what that was. Great Halt. When the rain delay came in. But the last time my team won a World Series, Civil War veterans were alive. So that's kind of what I hold on to. I'm like, oh, yeah, that's where I'm going with that. I'm proud of that fact.
Definitely. So I've got some business to talk about here, Mary. So, we have Peter on. Look, obviously, we're going to talk about the seminary. And, anybody who's been to Gettysburg knows about the Lutheran Theological Seminary at Gettysburg. It's got a long history before the war, during the Battle of Gettysburg, and, of course, since then. And we're going to talk about that. We're also going to talk about some of the cool things that go on nowadays, Mary, at the seminary. You don't get into church all that much or anything like that, so you probably wouldn't know. But there's other stuff that goes on. They are open besides Sunday. So I think we're going to talk more about some of the things that go on here. And what's great about Peter is he's one of the gurus here. And we probably bring him on to talk about it. So Peter, I guess we can kind of get started with this. talk maybe a little bit of how you got involved in
Yeah.
the seminary and how you've kind of progressed through it.
So, yeah, thanks. So, believe it or not, I think it was yesterday or the day before was the 9th anniversary of my job offer, which was pretty cool. It showed up on my Facebook memories. But I moved to Gettysburg from northern New Jersey in early 2013 in January, and I lived on West Middle Street behind the courthouse. And every day I would walk just to get out of my apartment. I'd walk up Middle Street, cut through the seminary, and then back down Chambersburg Street. And so I would pass the seminary building, which I knew was being turned into this new museum. And I was trying to get into museum work. I was a student in a master's program at the time. So I'd pass this building almost every day. And I would think to myself, oh my God, wouldn't it be so great if I could get a job there? This new museum that I know is opening up. And so that April, early May, I applied for a job, entry-level position as a visitor services assistant, and was hired and was in the cupola on July 1st, 2013, 150 years to the minute
Wow.
that Buford was up there. And got to give tours to James McPherson, Tom Corbett was the governor of Pennsylvania at the time, Pat Toomey, so they were all there. So I got to give these tours to these dignitaries. And then at the end of that year, I moved into a full-time position in operations, which turned into education, which sort of brought me up to being named the executive director 2 years ago at the end of this month. So long story short, I've been with the organization since before the doors opened. And it's been a wild ride. It continues to be a wild ride, and being able to, I still have moments where I'm walking through that building and I'm going, I really get to be here and do this, because it's such an iconic structure of the Civil War, but even beyond the Civil War. I mean, the building was built 30 years before the Battle of Gettysburg, so it has this long storied history of being a school for theologians from 1832 up to the battle, and then after the battle it returns to that. So it's just the people that walk through those halls and the stories that are sort of held in the walls of that building are important to the Civil War, but transcend the Civil War, transcend just those 3 days or the Battle of Gettysburg. So it's been a really great place to work and to be able to design the visitor experience and welcome hundreds of thousands of people through. So I'll stop right there for now. I know that kind of dumped a lot, but that's
awesome.
You mentioned it runs right around 1830. It started, of course. It's the oldest functioning Lutheran church in the country, and still founded by Samuel Simon Schmucker, who has a building named after him right on your campus over there.
Yep.
And it's certainly one that it's a building everybody knows, and it's got a lot of history to it. So, we thought we'd talk more about how it functioned in the battle. And I think, when you look at the Battle of Gettysburg, almost every building was going to be used as a hospital.
Yep.
And this one certainly was on both sides. So as you aforementioned a little bit ago, July 1st, 1863, the first day of the Battle of Gettysburg, is kind of really when it kind of took its wings and took off. And that's where famously, Brigadier General John Buford of the Cavalry was up there looking, he was a commander of the 1st Division of the Cavalry Corps of the Army of the Potomac. And he was, opening this battle west of Seminary Ridge. And he's going to witness the arrival of the 1st Corps to John Reynolds, who's going to come marching in for relief from himself. So you can kind of still go up there and you can still kind of, imagine and still see what he saw. And sometimes you swear you're down looking up, you swear you see him up there still.
Really, I mean, the building, the importance in the Battle of Gettysburg is going to start on June 30th, as Buford is going to ride into town from Emmitsburg up Washington Street past Tommy's Pizza, Fourscore, and he's going to look out towards the west, and he's going to see Johnston Pettigrew's brigade, which has come in on the afternoon of June 30th. And Pettigrew's brigade is going to pull back out of town, and Buford's going to kind of follow. But Buford is going to arrive on Seminary Ridge and is going to recognize sort of what's going on, what's the importance of the town of Gettysburg and the roads that are going to join there. Believe it or not, the seminary is the longest occupied ground by one or the other armies in the entire Battle of Gettysburg, because from June 30th until July 5th, it's going to be occupied by first the men of Buford's division, and then going to turn over into Confederate hands. But Buford is going to send his signal officer, Aaron Jerome, up to the cupola that night of June 30th, and he's going to say, look for campfires, and in the morning, look for dust. That's exactly what Jerome is going to do. And Buford may have been up there on the evening of June 30th as well, but he's certainly going to place his vedette lines based on what either he or Jerome can see from the cupola and covering those major approaches to Gettysburg. So the view from up there, what we like to say is that the view from up there really sets the stage for the first day, which is eventually going to set the stage for July 2nd and July 3rd. And it's going to be, what does Buford and Jerome see from up there, and how does it influence the decisions that they make? And then, of course, on the morning of July 1st, Buford's going to be up there watching the battle unfold to the west, turning to the east, watching for reinforcements from John Reynolds. And at some point, as Jerome writes, that he's going to see the corps flag of General Reynolds. And, if you have I'm sure everybody who's watching has seen the movie.
I was going to say, we all know that scene
many times. And, that account of Reynolds riding up and, what goes John the Devils to pay, that all comes from a letter from Aaron Jerome, the signal officer. So that's one of the historic records that that exact exchange is written in Jerome's letters. So it could have happened. But in any event, from Buford is probably going to see Reynolds from up there, and then Buford is going to have some sort of conversation with Reynolds, either from the cupola or down on the ground. Mary, the image that you have on your coffee mug is Buford and Reynolds meeting on the ground in front of the seminary.
Yeah, because I would imagine. I mean, we've all been up in the cupola. Yeah. I can't imagine them being like, "Hey, how's it going from the cupola to the ground?" Like they would have been shouting. I would imagine.
Wayne Motts and I did it one day where we tested it. Now, Wayne, everybody probably who's watching this knows Wayne too, who's extremely loud.
Yes.
So you'd have to be as loud as Wayne Motts to hear from the ground to the cupola.
Did it work then?
Maybe that tells you something about Reynolds and Buford.
Wow, so the shouting might have worked.
Yeah, there's no question about it. And and obviously as the battle's going to go on, the Union lines of McPherson Ridge, the west of Seminary, they're going to get driven back. We don't talk about the whole first day of Battle of Gettysburg here, but suffice to say the Confederates are going to take the territory. And you mentioned that it's longest held. There's going to be guys like Penner's division. Dorsey Penner's going to break that Union line. The First Corps is going to break first, Mary. We're going to take care of that right off the bat. Let's get that out of the way now instead of the 11th Corps. We've talked about that many times. And it's going to help that delaying action, that the Union is going to retreat back to the town, led by the famous Iron Brigade and all that stuff we talked about. And there's really no more real infantry combat that takes place really at that point on. And Robert E. Lee is going to take over the area. He's going to have his headquarters there. And it's probably a good question for you, Peter. You probably get this all the time, but it is debated whether or not Robert E. Lee himself got to the cupola or not. And it depends on who you, like any of this stuff, it depends on who you talk to. Me personally, I think it's a cool view. If I was in charge, I'd want to go up there to check it out. So I'd like to think he probably did, but what do you think?
Yeah, so the way that I answer that question when I get asked many times is that he should not have been up there. Mm-hmm. That by the time that the Confederate Army takes the ridge, the building is a field hospital. Under the military laws at the time, if it's being used as a hospital, it should not be used for military purposes. So the one eyewitness account that we have of Lee being up there comes from Levi Graham of the 149th Pennsylvania, who was at the time a prisoner in the hospital. He had been helping one of his comrades into the seminary hospital on the afternoon of July 1st, and he gets caught in there as the building falls into Confederate hands. So he writes that he sees Lee up there. Now, the issue is that Graham is writing this in 1909. So we're looking at 46 years later.
Mhm.
The other factor that I tend to think about is Lee's health on July 2nd and July 3rd.
Mm-hmm.
There's
Absolutely.
the story of W.W. Blackford coming up to Lee's headquarters on the night of the 2nd and watching Lee, leave and go behind his tent multiple times, doubled over in pain, and being told that that General Lee is suffering from diarrhea. So, is the general going to want to climb up 4 flights of stairs and 2 ladders to get up to the cupola where, I throw that in as a not as any defamation against Lee, but just as a practical question. Is he going to want to take that chance if in the span of a half hour he's going behind his tent 3 times? So I don't know.
Yes, well, then obviously, like with most of this stuff, there are no absolutes when
Right.
you're talking Civil War, because that's even the story we talk about, the devils to pay and all that. It's people write it down, but you never know, and that's why when people say this happened, that happened, I'd like to think you went up there just because he imagined it, but again, there's many reasons why, as you mentioned, he didn't want to, climb stairs in a situation he was in.
Yeah.
But in any case, who knows?
Who knows? And that's
Yeah.
that's totally true. Yeah.
But it's fun to speculate, have these bar type conversations and wonder what that is. But as you mentioned, Peter, it was turned into a field hospital.
Yep.
And it was certainly one that was one of the more gruesome ones, and it's one of the more famous ones. A lot of people on both sides were there, and kind of and it was been to it now. I know we're going to talk more about the museum here in a little bit, but certainly anybody who goes in that building today and isn't sure what the purpose of that is going to know pretty quickly that it was a hospital.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and so as the Iron Brigade, well, let's back it up half a step. I contend, and nobody has proven me wrong yet, but that the seminary is one of the only, if not the only, site on the Gettysburg battlefield that serves in 3 roles in terms of hospital care. That it was a primary aid station for Buford's division, or Gamble's brigade,
Mm-hmm.
that it then goes and becomes a field hospital for the men of the 1st Division of the 1st Corps, which we know that is true, that it's set up as a division field hospital for the Iron Brigade and Cutler's Brigade. And then it turns into administratively a general hospital sometime around July 22nd. So there's actually some nuances there to the hospital period. When it becomes a field hospital, when the Iron Brigade and Cutler's Brigade come up, it is only supposed to be accepting men from the 1st Division of the 1st Corps. And for a large part of the morning, it probably is. And then as the battle comes really almost literally to the back door of the seminary with the last stand and the barricade fight about 4 o'clock in the afternoon, you start to see men of the 3rd Division of Roy Stone's Bucktail Brigade and Biddle's Brigade end up in the hospital. And that's where you see a lot of guys from the 151st, which is my background, end up in the seminary hospital. And then by July 22nd, as hospitals are being consolidated in Gettysburg, you end up basically with 2 hospitals, with Letterman on the east side of town and the seminary on the west side of town. And somebody said to me, well, why the seminary? This was on a live stream, and I was like, well, wait a minute, it's the perfect place for a general hospital. Yep. It's got good drainage, it's got good airflow, which was very valuable to people to thinking about medicine in the 19th century. So it makes sense that it would be a hospital for a long period of time. And the last patient that leaves is George McFarland of the 151st Pennsylvania. And he leaves in mid-September of 1863. So 2.5 months after he's dragged in the north entrance of the building.
Wow. So
No,
that's
to
how
me,
long it lasted for as a hospital then.
2.5 months. And when the seminary closes, I think that the last hospital is Letterman, which is November, but the seminary, and one of the reasons that the seminary ceases to be a hospital is the seminary board is really leaning on the government to get out, because they have a fall semester that's starting. The seminary board in August votes to put together a commission to send to Washington, D.C. if they need to prevail upon the supreme military authorities to get the hell out of our building, because we have students to teach. They don't have to do that because the seminary is vacated on September 16th, but on September 24th, classes start in the building. So 8 days between the time the last patient leaves and until classes start again. Yeah.
Wow. So were there, like, during that time when it was a hospital, like after the battle, what it was Union and Confederates that were in there. My one question is, and I think I've read this somewhere before, was Isaac Trimble one of the ones that was?
Yep, it was Trimble, Kemper, Henry Kidd Douglas, and Robert Powell, who's the colonel of the 5th Texas.
We've seen 2 of 4 of those graves, right, Darren?
Yeah, took a kid. Douglas was a tough one to find, but we found him over there in Shepherdston. We he's a tough one. He's towards the back.
When we just saw Trimble this past weekend, and the reason Trimble was of interest to me is because I've been to Johnson's Island in Sandusky, Ohio, in that area, and that's where they sent him. It was an officer's prison camp. And it was Simon Cameron, the former Secretary of War, that alerted President Lincoln. He said, Trimble knows a lot about railways. You might want to do something about that guy.
And there's some really interesting stories about people from Gettysburg, just kind of visitors coming to see these 4 Confederate celebrities.
Really?
And yeah. And Henry Kidd Douglas, the heartthrob that he is very popular amongst ladies coming in, and so they sneak him out, and they go out on the town. There's a story that's written in a diary by a chaplain. I think he's from the 19th Virginia, and he writes about some women are there and want to go from Trimble's room into Douglas's room. And the Pennsylvania militia who are guarding the building are not going to let him in. And I think Kemper and Trimble are in the same room, and Kemper pulls a knife on the militia. And yeah, exactly. Right. And,
oh my God.
And I mean, it's like a pocket knife or something, but it so unnerves this chaplain that's writing this has no love whatsoever for the Pennsylvania Dutch militia, very derisive against them. And they end up he lets these ladies pass from one of the rooms to the other. So there's this, and now you've got me going. Trimble goes on a hunger strike.
I've heard about that before.
Yeah. He talks about it's the Patriot Daughters of Lancaster who write that Trimble wants the best food cooked, and if it's not the best food, he won't eat it. And then one day they bring him like fried ham and eggs, and I'm like, yeah, come on, bring it on. And he refuses to eat it, and they say, well, leave it for him until his appetite improves, and eventually he does. Essentially, they're not going to bring him anything else. It's this or nothing. But
he's about to be sent to a prison camp on Lake Erie.
Yeah, so there are these. What's really interesting to me is when you look at sort of the period between July 22nd and September, which is by July 22nd, all of the immediate, sort of hair on fire cleanup is done for all intents and purposes. So you have this period of time where it's sort of like, it's not, that things have calmed down, but they sort of have in terms of it. It's just sort of this day-to-day routine of hospitals in Gettysburg. And you see sort of these human interest stories of these little kind of vignettes of interesting stuff that goes on. So that's what really interests me. Like, how are they dealing like with the day-to-day stuff on like August 13th? Like what has happened? That's just an arbitrary day.
Yeah, and that's what we like talking about in the podcast. So to know that stuff about Trimble and Henry Kidd Douglas is really interesting because, I mean, I didn't know any of that about them at all. And that's really fascinating to know that just as they're there in the hospital.
Essentially hanging, like, what are they doing? Like, they're having visitors and, pulling knives on people.
It just shows the human side of these people.
Exactly.
We're so used to reading these people in the books, the Coddingtons and the Fonzes of the world, and make it sound like just names on a page, and you'd find out these stories of Trimble refusing to eat eggs. Maybe he wanted it scrambled. They try to stick him with the sunny side up, but he wasn't having it.
This bastard.
But Ben there, he tried to send it back. He was probably the original Karen. Actually, is probably what it was.
Isaac Trimble's the original Karen.
Let me talk to the manager of the cupola.
That needs to be a meme now. Trimble with Karen hair.
But again, it's great, and obviously the Kid Douglas stories are legendary, especially with the women and stuff like that. And if you read his book, I wrote with Stonewall. Yep. He definitely did a lot more than writing with Stonewall. So it was a lot more fun reading about that stuff. And again, humanizing some of these guys. But I think it's cool when you talk about it because a lot of famous Civil War people went through there, and it still casts such a large shadow on the whole battlefield. People will talk about Cemetery Hill being the focal point on day 1, day 2, and day 3, but I think when you show a picture of Old Dorm there, the cupola building, you really see it really brings out the Gettysburg, and that's why it's great. What they ultimately did is they made it into a museum. Yeah. And so for years, I've been going to Gettysburg way more times than I should. And you drive by it and you'd see it. And now when they finally opened it up, it kind of really continues to tell that story in a real 3D type of environment for people to really study. And that's where you come in as far as what you do. So I guess, talk about it, the beginning of the original concepts of this museum, how it all kind of came together, and what how do you think it's going?
Yeah, so the story really starts back in the 1950s because the building and I guess it's going to kind of starts back in 1895. In 1895, the seminary is expanding, attendance is picking up, and the seminary constructs Valentine Hall, which is the building to the immediate south of the seminary. Still is today the administrative center of the seminary. And when they do that, what's now the museum, Schmucker Hall, is turned into a dormitory. And actually one of the colloquial names for it is Old Dorm. And by the 1950s, the building is in a pretty bad state. And the Commonwealth comes in and says, look, if people are going to continue to live here, you've got to bring this building up to code, fire code. And there's a lot of this back and forth about what do we do about the building? Do we sort of gut the inside and build a fireproof structure within the shell of this building? But ultimately, the seminary realizes that it's more cost effective to just construct brand new dorms. And with that comes the decision to actually knock Schmucker Hall down. And from 1954 to 1959, there's this back and forth over knocking the building down. You read board minutes and they say, yeah, by the next time we meet, the building's going to be gone. Luckily for everybody, there's a sort of a consortium of people that come together, licensed battlefield guides, the Adams County Historical Society, the National Park Service is involved, about what can we do to save this building. So it's a very sort of in the early stages of the historic preservation movement in the nation. What are we going to do to save this building? And ultimately, the Historical Society moves in and they inhabit the building for about 50 years. And by the late 2000 teens, mid to late, The building now has not been updated since 1895. And so there's no modern HVAC system, substandard bathrooms, the electric is shot, no fire suppression system. Basically, it's either going to fall down or burn down or something. And in the late 90s, the seminary had established a 501c3 nonprofit foundation with the objective to care for the historic buildings on campus. And so about 2011, they start this campaign, get some historic tax credits, and are able to essentially get about $15 million to rehab the building, turn it into a museum, put the walking trail in, put the parking lot in. And that's raised through historic tax credit financing, donations, government grants, etc. Because that's a long technical way of saying that, of sort of establishing how we came to be. But it's a straight case of adaptive reuse that they saw this building, and fortunately or unfortunately, I don't know which, I was never in the building before it was the museum. But I've seen pictures, and apparently it was just had gotten to the point where it needed a major rehabilitation to maintain. And the other part of that is, for many years, access to the cupola was restricted due to safety concerns and insurance. And I remember talking to Wayne Motz, and when Wayne was the director of the Historical Society, he didn't go up there. And I thought to myself, well, damn, if Wayne didn't go up there, then there really must have been a concern. You know, the Historical Society would lead tours twice a year, and it was a premium fundraiser. But now we offer tours 6 times a day, and that's part of the rehab of the building. Is not just the exhibits and what you see in the building, but you get this view that was instrumental in the Battle of Gettysburg.
Like, I mean, that's why preservation is so important, right? Because you can be where they were. And I mean, I'm someone who has worked in the conservation field. I have that's one of my degrees is in museum conservation. I understand the background that goes into that. It's so much. So to be able to be in that cupola, is to know the work that had to go into making that happen is really amazing. But the fact that you get to be where Buford and Jerome were, and to see their view is really remarkable.
Now, I will take a step in and say that, as many people point out, it is not the original cupola.
It's not, yeah.
It's the same space, it's the same height, and frankly, I think it's the same floor that Buford stood on. So for the listeners who don't know the full story, in August of 1913, about a month after the 50th anniversary of the battle, there's a huge storm in Gettysburg, and a bunch of houses catch fire, but the building is struck by lightning, the weather vane on top of the cupola, and it starts a fire. From what we understand, the fire burns the cupola to about the roof line, but the flooring, as it is today, was covered with tin at the time. And if you look as you're going up to the cupola, you can see that the wood that is on the underside of the cupola is very similar to the wood that's original in the building. So we suspect that, yes, the fire destroyed everything above where you're standing. It was rebuilt to the original specifications, but the flooring that you're standing on is the flooring that Buford and Jerome were standing on. Needless to say, you are at the height. You are seeing the view that Buford saw. Yeah.
And that's very cool. And that's why that tour is so worth going on, to see that view and to have explained, not just the history of the seminary itself, but what the building was used in the battle, but to get that kind of the bird's eye view to what they were seeing, to what Buford was seeing that day, why he made the decisions he made, and to know where he saw Reynolds coming in on the morning of July the 1st is very cool.
Yeah, and it first of all, every time I go up there, I feel like I see something different, and there were some dead trees that were on the seminary property that recently got taken down. And so one of the trees they took down, you can clearly see Big Round Top now.
We
In
noticed
the
that.
yeah, in the winter you could always see it when the leaves were off the trees, but now they took this dead tree down and you can see Big Round Top at any time of the year. The other thing is, unfortunately, based on the angle, you can't see where the Cashtown Pass is, but you can get a sense of where the village of Cashtown is and where the pass was. So you can sort of see, I think that not necessarily, it does show a view of July 1st, but it also shows, in a way, a view of the Gettysburg campaign. One of my favorite things to do to go up there is to talk about what was Lee planning in June of May and June of 1863. I mean, what touched this all off, and to be able to go up and see the South Mountains and recognize that, yeah, you can't see what's going on in the Cumberland Valley on the other side, and that's what he was banking on, that you can get from Virginia up to basically Harrisburg without being detected, and that's what he does. So, as sort of a strategic campaign view, you can see that from up there, in addition to a more tactical first day view.
Yeah, one of my favorite stories too is with we like to talk about the first day Oak Ridge, the story about the fingers pointing, pointing north as Robert Rhodes guys are coming down, coming down where the Peace Light is now in that area up there, and just look up and imagine what that was. Because when you're standing up there, you can see, like to your point, exactly what they saw. Now they have better eyes than we do. They'd see a little cloud of dust, and they tell you exactly how many people were there, and who was left-handed, and they can tell you anything by that point. But you could get a good idea. But when you're standing up there, your mind does tend to run. You got to take the buildings out of the way,
Yeah.
and mentally, you have a really good idea of what it must have looked like. And that's why we were saying earlier that preservation is so important, because in a lot of places that building's probably gone after that fire. They're just going to take the whole thing down. They're going to build something else. And now, because of the work that you guys have done, as well as some other parts of the town, that is able to be shared now. And I think it's something that needs to be promoted. So, right now, if you go up there right now, you can go in, you can see, and it's a fantastic display of the hospitals. And that's the part when I think about after the cupola, what I think mostly about my visits, I've been there a few times, is those rooms with the amputations and the soldiers sitting there.
Yeah.
And there's that one guy who's sitting on the bed, looks like he's texting somebody on his phone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We get that a lot.
He's like, that is just like, and like I was telling you before we started recording, one of my friends saw those photos, and she has worked in a museum in Dubai. And now she's working in another one here in Canada. And she said those are amazing exhibits. And she was in the same field as me, like conservation, exhibit development, and all that. Those exhibits you have are not only haunting, but they really tell the story well. And I think they show somebody from our time what those men went through. Like you sit there and like, there's a guy in a bed, but then there's guys on the floor. So clearly this is how many wounded there were. It's a really great way to tell the story.
Well, and it's interesting that you bring that up, because the story that I have been told, now I was not involved in any of the exhibit design, but a lot of the people that were are still around. And one of the stories that I have been told is that one of the great supporters of the museum, both and helping it get established, and then also on the exhibit design team, is a local doctor. And he went through, before opening, as they were laying out those scenes, and he said it's not bloody enough. and the designers went back and added more paint, red paint, and it's not egregious, but I think that it is accurate. This was not something that we should be shielded from, and something that we should think that there was only a little bit of blood when they did an amputation. No. And these surgeons, you look at Carl Schurz's observation of the surgeons at the Spangler farm, where he says, the surgeons sleeves rolled up to the elbows, aprons covered in blood, and next, this was something that was unfathomable for us. But the exhibit at Seminary Ridge, I think, starts to get close, is real. It becomes almost realistic, some sense of realistic. It's showing, and one of the great things that this museum does is that it shows the human costs of war.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, you want to go to war, and it's a product of the post 9/11 world. You want to go to war. This is what you're going to be facing. So I think it does a really great job of that. And one of the things that has been very interesting to me is there was a book that was written in 2014 called Learning from the Wounded by Shauna Devine, who's up at Western Ontario. And she does a fantastic job of showing that surgeons were better trained than we tend to think, that by the midpoint of the war, surgeons have been tested, and that they are using the Civil War to learn about the human body and learn about injuries and diseases, and essentially doing the best they can. There's no knowledge of germ theory yet, but that I guess what I'm trying to say is that the Civil War was not the butcher bloodbath that has traditionally been presented when it comes to medicine. Mm-hmm. And so we try to use that scholarship and sort of show that doctors, did have an idea of what they were doing and were doing the best they could to save soldiers. But we're hamstrung in some cases by the fact that they didn't know that germs existed. So, we try to be, again, as close to realistic as possible, I guess, is what I'm trying to get at.
I definitely did a good job of it, because that I'm sure there's been many a nightmare that have come out of that building. People who've gone in there, because it's we think about this war, we think about the some of the amputations and what these people went through, but we're visual people. You can read all you want, but in your mind sometimes, but people are, especially, people are visual, and you see that, and you see these guys lying in the bed, and guy's reading his Bible, and he's sitting there, and he's all covered in blood and sitting in blood on the floor. And it really tells you, it reminds you that, thousands of people went to the state of Pennsylvania, and they never left. And they're still there, and some of the last sites they saw would have been the sites that you'll see when you go into that museum and you see what they did.
The inside of that building. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think the one thing too, that you do really well at Seminary Ridge is you capture that for those of us that learn visually, that need that, how it looks as a hospital, you capture that. But then you also have the artifacts. You have that handkerchief that belonged to Reynolds.
Yeah.
You have the actual artifacts as well, which I know there's some that need to see the actual artifacts for it to seem real to them. I'm a person, I need both. I like to see what, actual things from the battle. But then if I have that display, like in the hospital, I can visualize, and I can feel what happened, and you do that so well at the museum.
Thank you.
And I think you need to be commended for that, because that's something that is very difficult in the museum field to be able to do, to be able to bridge that gap between like, okay, we need to display artifacts, but artifacts don't always tell the story. They can't, well, they do, but they can't convey it to us visual learners that need to see. So if we can see that hospital scene, it makes it that much real when we see that handkerchief of Reynolds and when we know his story as well.
And that's one of the many things that this museum, the designers did really well, is that there is audio. The permanent exhibit is called Voices of Duty and Devotion. And so as you walk through the museum, you are hearing these voices of people who were in and around the seminary building during its history. So you have this auditory element, and then you also have this visual element of both those hospital displays. But one of the things that resonates with people really well is the paintings by Dale Gallen that were turned into murals. And so, of course, we have no photographs of the first day of the battle, but Dale Gallen did 10 paintings that show historically accurate depictions of sort of what the first day would have looked like. So you do get these visual elements that, again, can help those learners with different learning styles. And then on top of that, you have the tangible art, and people can't touch them, but the artifacts. And the story behind that handkerchief was, I guess it was about 7 years ago, we were doing an artifact rotation, and I was talking with Greg Goodell, who is the curator for the National Park Service, really fantastic, one of my favorite people in Gettysburg. And I'm sitting in Greg's office, and he says, this is how it went. He said, "Hey, do you want John Reynolds?" Yes. I didn't even care what it was. He said, if it belonged to John Reynolds, I was taking it. And we've had it on loan ever since. And yeah, that's totally one of my favorite pieces, because it's like, holy shit, that's John Reynolds' handkerchief.
Yeah, that was actually one of our questions for you tonight was, what is your favorite artifact? And well, I think you just answered it.
Well, no, I mean, there are so many great artifacts. To go back to the medical stuff, one of the things that surgeons were doing during the Civil War was collecting specimens and sending them to the Army Medical Museum in Washington, D.C. So we were able to procure some of these medical specimens from the Army Medical Museum. So we have a knee joint that was amputated in the seminary building. We have a scapula, a shoulder blade of a soldier that was wounded on July 1st. One of the things that I have been privileged to do is work on these artifact rotations, and to get these objects that are as connected as possible to the story we tell. Recently, we're actually in the midst of an artifact rotation right now, and we borrowed a stove that was forged at Thaddeus Stevens Ironworks in Caledonia. So it allows us to tell the story of Thaddeus Stevens and the Underground Railroad. And, we somehow got a 400-pound cast iron stove out of a second-story apartment, down a flight of stairs, into a van, into the museum, over a railing, and into the display. But it's so cool there. It's like, how could we not get it?
See, if you got it at IKEA, you could have made it there.
Okay, put it together, right? Yeah,
but there would have been parts missing.
And
don't get me going about IKEA. So look around this place.
There would have been parts missing.
But talk about the museum now. We've been a handful of times. Not everybody does. Some people are going to say, well, you know what? I don't know a heck of a lot about the Battle of Gettysburg. I don't know if I'm going to go and spend the money in the place. So we know what you get for your money. So when somebody walks in, they pay their fare. What are they going to get when they walk into a museum? What are they going to, what are they going to see? What are they going to experience?
Yeah. So you think about uh, what you would see at a place like the Visitor Center, and I will preface this by saying that the Visitor Center does a fantastic job, and I'm good friends with Wayne and the Park Service, and it gives a great this level of the Battle of Gettysburg. If you are coming to Gettysburg for the first or second time, that's the place to go. But we consider ourselves complimentary and a bit of a boutique museum that, if you want to start to go down into some of these topics, if you want to really take the first day of the battle and the care of the wounded and the dilemmas that led to the Civil War and really sort of drill down into those issues, this is the place to do it. The other unique thing that we bring is that we are in the historic building. A lot of times you go to a museum to see artifacts, and the museums are in newer buildings, and we have the unique perspective of being a quote unquote new museum, 10 years old now, but newish museum, but in a building that is 190 years old. Going to be 190 years in a few months. So, the floors creak, the doorways are askew. The go up to the cupola, the floorboards are original in the attic. So there's this unique sense of place, where it's sort of combining what you might see in like a historic house museum, but it's bringing to the table a more modern museum where you're seeing objects. So it's sort of the best of all worlds. It's I still, and I visit a lot of museums. I'm one of those nerds that when he's on vacation is going to museums, but it's unique in its perspective that it's a museum in a building where things did happen. It's not a historic house tour, but it's not a new museum. It's a combination of the two.
And if you do go up to the cupola, I was gonna say you'll get a fantastic story. You don't need to know the Battle of Gettysburg to go. Most people who listen to this certainly do, but if a newbie comes into town and they go to the cupola, they're going to have one of your guides who's going to tell them the great story of that first day of the Battle of Gettysburg and what goes on to it. And so you're going to get a really good high level overview of what happened in there, so the people standing in that cupola at that moment can feel the story themselves by hearing the story in the place of where something actually literally happened. So they can point out there and say, that's where Robert Rhodes' division came down.
Yeah.
Right over there's where Dorsey Pender broke the line. That's the benefit of that, instead of hearing it in a class or like an inside museum.
Yeah.
And people might say, oh, you're making this up, but I have been there up there many times where people have said, oh, it makes sense now. The first day makes sense now. And that's what we're trying to do, is that, to get up there high and to be able to see everything that you just said helps people go, oh, yeah, I get it.
And that's what we want to do. And I mean, admittedly, like Darren and I we consider ourselves first day junkies. Like that's like our favorite day of Gettysburg is the first day.
Best day.
But even if your day is Pickett's Charge, even if it's Culp's Hill on July the 2nd, go see the Seminary Ridge Museum, because it is, it's going to help you understand the battle that much more. And you guys do a lot of events.
Yeah.
As we were discovering from your website, like, you do virtual ones with different Civil War roundtables. As we discovered, you're doing one with the Phil Kearney Civil War roundtable coming up.
A couple of weeks, yep.
As well. But you were telling us before we got started, May 27th, the walking tour, the sunset at Seminary Ridge.
Yeah, so we try to do, try being the operative word, one event a month, and it varies. We try to do a combination of virtual and in-person events because we know that we have people all over the country and we want them to be able to engage with us as well. So starting towards the end of this month, I guess it's 3 weeks, 4 weeks from tomorrow, we're going to pick up on our walking tours again, and those have been very, very popular. It's free, supported by the Rotary Club of Gettysburg, where we have about an hour-long walking tour of the seminary grounds. And on May 27th, we're going to do the final attack, which looks at the barricade line on the seminary grounds, but looks at it through the eyes of individual soldiers who were holding that barricade line or attacking that barricade line and what they saw, not the people that were saying, hold this line or attack this line. We're looking at the individual soldier. We're also, as we move through the summer, we're going to pick up a tour that we started last year called Art and Photography on Seminary Ridge. So looking at all of the various depictions of the seminary building and the ridge over the last 100 and almost 200 years. We're going to look at the seminary in the battle, which looks at the people who lived on Seminary Ridge and the students that were there as the battle broke out and what they experienced. And then a new tour, which looks at some of the architecture of Seminary Ridge, which tells stories in and of itself, is that the seminary, for better or worse, has never knocked down a building in its almost 200-year history. So you look around the campus and you see all these different architectural styles, and it tells you a little bit. So that is all free. It's the last Friday of the month, or the fourth Friday of the month. And it's a great way to interact and to get out and see like-minded friends. As we move into the fall, one of the events that we did last year for the first time that was really, really great was called 24 Hours on the Ridge.
Oh, wow.
And I don't know if you knew about this, but it was a fundraiser as part of the Adams County Community Foundation's Giving Spree. We actually kept the museum open for 24 hours.
Oh my God.
So at 5 o'clock, we're supposed to close, and we're just like, boom, kept going. And from midnight to 4 a.m., we showed the movie Gettysburg in the galleries.
That would be so cool.
And after, so the movie ended at 4:15 or so, and then we put on Young Frankenstein for about half an hour and watched that. But we did sunset, midnight, and sunrise tours of the cupola. Oh, wow. We had special speakers come in, and it was a fantastic event. I slept there. I was there. I got there at like 3 o'clock. I'd been there, and then I left, and then I came back, and it was like 3 o'clock in the afternoon. And I didn't get home until 6 o'clock the following night. So I was there for 28 hours or something. I took a nap.
That's pretty cool, though.
About an hour and a half.
That is so cool.
Yeah, so we're going to be doing that again. That was a ton of fun.
That was my next question. Are you going to be doing that event again?
Yeah.
So when is that going to be?
It's going to be November 3rd and 4th, I think, or 4th and 5th. Let me see here. I'm bringing up my calendar so I can find out.
Nice.
It's going to be, I think it's going to be November 2nd and 3rd this year.
That's very cool.
And then, so yeah, the big, when we get into past the walking tour season,
yep.
We go back to doing stuff on Zoom.
Yep.
And that allows us to interact with people beyond the borders of Gettysburg. So lately we've had speakers come in and do a 45-minute, half hour, 45-minute presentation. Scott Mingus, who recently wrote the book well, written a lot of books, but most recently York County in the Civil War. He gave a talk. So yeah, the best way to keep up with all of that is to look at our Facebook page, look at our website. We update regularly about different things that are coming up. We've had wine and paint nights in the museum. I'm all about how does this become an integral part of the community and is not just a museum. The other thing that maybe you don't know about is that we designed an escape room in the
I
attic.
saw that on your like that. I was like,
So
what?
we launched that
That's
last
so cool.
year, and it's an hour-long experience. It's after the museum closes, and you take on the role of a Signal Corps team on July 1st in the attic of the building, responsible for collecting information about the Confederates' advance and relaying that information to Oliver Howard on Cemetery Hill.
Oh.
And you have to do that before the Confederates take the building, which is in an hour after you start. And so there are boxes and puzzles and clues, and there's a soundscape. So there's a speaker that as the time starts to run down, the cannonballs and bullets, you start to hear that more as the Confederates are getting closer. It's and we designed it all in-house, and we ran it, I think, 20 something times last year, and 15 times it was like it took off, like
wow.
Unbelievably took off. And it's been a lot of fun to see people who want to do something after hours, or maybe don't want to come to the museum, although it includes admission, just to be able to do something different, engage with the museum and the content in a different way.
Well, as two people who study Howard and appreciate him,
yeah,
that is something nice to hear that he's included in that. So that's awesome. That's very cool.
Yeah.
And of course, I don't know if it isn't your so much thing, but one thing you can definitely do is you guys doing Beer Fest again?
We're probably going to do something a little bit smaller at some point. Not on the scale that it had been in years past. But we're hoping to do something that incorporates breweries and food trucks.
I've been there. Shockingly, I've been there a couple of times for that. That's but that's always a lot of fun. But I think it's a great discussion. I think looking at the whole picture, I've never heard anybody say a bad thing about the whole thing. And you got a really good tour. You can walk around. You can walk around, see this stuff at your own pace. You can take your time. But then when it's time to go up to the cupola, someone's gonna bring you up, and there's usually other people with you, and you'll get up there. And some people take a little bit longer than others to get up there, like Mary here. But we will get up there. And then you'll have someone actually give you a good guided tour of the whole thing. So even if you don't know, even if you're not sure what happened or you don't really care what happened, it's an awesome place to be to hear the story. Because even you hear a lot of times people sit there and say, "Oh, that's so cool." And they don't know anything. They don't know from Robert E. Lee to Sarah Lee, but they still think it's pretty cool. But they think it's cool here in the story. They go, "Oh, that's really neat. That's pretty cool." And that's something that they're seeing because they can picture the whole thing going down to the story, which is very, very unique in a lot of different places.
And it's a view. I mean, even if one person in a couple likes the museum and or likes the Civil War, and the other one, could care less, it's a great view. It's a beautiful view.
It is.
And that counts for something, I hope.
Oh, it does. And I got a second one. What Darren says, it's like you can do so much there. The museum exhibits are amazing. It complements the tour so well. And then you have the escape room, which you could be capturing people that are not into the Civil War as much. You got families, you got parents there that, well, we're in the Civil War, but our tweens or teenagers are not.
Exactly.
You can do the escape room, right? And do all that. It's definitely a place to visit when you were in Gettysburg. And it tells a story. It's the exhibits are, as someone who's been on the other, has had to help make exhibits. Wow. Like, I would have loved to have been part of a museum that could have
I
made
know.
exhibits like that. Like, that is, like, I saw those exhibits and I'm like, oh my God, I would have loved to have helped make these exhibits. You guys have done an amazing job in telling the story, for just all different types of, I'm so into hitting the different types of how people learn. But wow.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much.
You guys do awesome. And thank you for joining us tonight for this.
Thank you for having me. I'm so glad that I ran into you both, and I look forward to seeing you on the walking tour and elsewhere in Gettysburg.
But not shockingly, you ran into us in a bar, which is no surprise, but that's
shocking.
a good thing.
I did not have a Labatt Blue at the time.
No, it was on the inside. That's why you couldn't see it. But that's another story. But it's poor Mary never gets away with it. But no, but it's been great having you on here. So thanks for joining us. It's great. Yeah. And certainly we love telling the story. We, like Mary said earlier, we love the first day. You can go anywhere on the first day, look over your shoulder and see the seminary, and it's just such a great place to be. And it's great that it's been preserved, and it's fantastic the work that you guys have done. I know it's a whole team that you have there who put all this time and effort into making it so these people can see it. They may visit it just one time in your entire lives, but they'll remember the mannequins, and they're going to remember the cupola, and they're never going to forget it. So thanks for joining us again, Peter. It's great that you're able to take some time. I know you're busy. You get your PhD stuff going. So taking a few minutes to deal with us knuckleheads for a little while.
You caught me in the between now and May 16th. I have a break. So what is that? I have 11 days. So you caught me at a good time to start up with the summer class. So thank you.
No, definitely. All right, Mary, well, that's pretty good. So what's coming up for us? What's next on this funny little show we do?
Next on the list, we will be doing our usual Facebook Live on Saturday. Next week, we will be talking Yellow Tavern, and then we will be into Seven Pines.
Oh, so Jeb Stewart's we're gonna have a lot of fun with the Jeb people next week, Mary.
Yeah.
You better get your Kevlar ready for that one.
Yeah, and a Canadian is involved with Jeb Stewart, so.
It doesn't too well, not too well. All right. Well, we got some fun stuff coming down the pike. So any final words from you, Fincheroo?
Well, thank you to Peter for joining us tonight for this episode. It was awesome to discuss this. Thank you to you, Darren, for being the amazing co-host you are with this, and all our listeners. You guys rock. We do. All right. We appreciate everybody. Thanks for joining us. So we look forward to seeing you, as we like to say, Mary, on the other side. Yep. Here we go.